Welcome to Theme 1, Careers in Sales for Personal Selling and Sales. If you remember back to intro marketing or even in the third year integrated cases in marketing, you'll recall that personal selling is the most expensive by far of any of the marketing promotional strategies. Personal selling by far is the most expensive. So you might ask yourself, well, if it's the most expensive, why is it that companies choose to incorporate personal selling and sales into their promotional mix? And the reason is because it works. And so for the next semester, and certainly the next several weeks of lectures, we're going to talk about careers in sales and how sales work and why sales are so important so that you have a better understanding of exactly why companies are investing in this particular type of promotional activity. What makes personal selling different than the other kinds of promotional activities that companies can embark on? Well, personal selling specifically and always involves person-to-person communication with a potential customer. That communication can be in person, it can be over the telephone, or can use other kinds of technology like video conferencing, for example, or email or electronic communications. But at the end of the day, it involves person-to-person interaction, whether that interaction lasts for a few seconds or whether that interaction between two people lasts for actually a considerable time. It could be years and years if the sales relationship is particularly productive. Ultimately, sales is the process of developing relationships with potential customers. Again, whether those are short-term relationships or long-term, really in-depth and almost intimate relationships with customers. It's about discovering what your customers' needs are and finding ways in which your organization can help satisfy those needs. It's about helping them customers match the appropriate products that you might have in the arsenal of products for your company and what the customers' needs are, and sort of finding those matches and helping those customers make those matches. And ultimately, it's also about communicating the various benefits that a customer could derive from your products and services by informing them, reminding them, and ultimately persuading them that what you have to offer might be just what they need to fix any particular problem that they might be having. Just like other areas of marketing, personal selling and sales has changed really dramatically over the past decade or two. Prior to that time, one of the major functions of salespeople was that they were a source of information for customers who were looking to learn more about a particular product or product category. But that actually has changed quite dramatically over the past couple of decades because now people have access to information quite literally at their fingertips. If I want to know the specifications on a particular make and model of vehicle, I don't need to go and talk to a salesperson at the dealership. I can actually just go online and in a few clicks of my computer mouse or a few keystrokes, I can actually have access to an overwhelming amount of information about any particular product that I'm looking for. So the information economy really has made some significant changes or forced some significant changes in the personal selling and sales field. And there's really four major developments. The first one is around information technology and electronic commerce. We can now purchase items that used to require us to actually they would force us to go through an intermediary, through a salesperson. Now we can buy a lot of things electronically without ever having to speak to a person. And again, back to that information technology, we have access to information today at our fingertips that we never had before. Information now, or data now, is considered to be a major strategic resource for a lot of companies. And so not only is information beneficial to consumers who now have access to all this information about products, but the reality is companies now have access to wealth of information about their own customers as well. So if you schedule an appointment to go in and talk to a realtor or talk to a car salesperson, if they're smart, they're going to go online and check out your Facebook page or check out your Instagram account and learn as much about you as humanly possible. So there not only is information readily available to consumers, don't forget that information is also readily available to companies, and they view it very much as a strategic resource. Businesses are increasingly being defined by the relationships they have with their customers. Businesses have long understood that investing in relationships really can pay off. It is much more efficient for existing businesses to cultivate those existing customer relationships than it is for them to try and go and find new customers all the time. Yes, they do continue to have to try to find new customers. That's an important part of their business's growth as well. But businesses recognize how important it is for them to build those really lasting, deep relationships with their existing customers, because that's where their bread and butter, where their money is coming from. It's much more cost effective to do that. And the last one is that sales today very much depends on adding value, because customers can now do some of the sales functions that were traditionally done by salespeople in the past. Now customers can do those things themselves using technology. Salespeople now have to find additional ways to provide value. Otherwise, why would a customer use a salesperson if they weren't providing additional value? Why wouldn't a customer just do go through the purchase process independent of a sales professional, unless that sales professional is in fact adding value? So what kind of value do salespeople add? Um, there's a variety of different ways salespeople can add value. They can offer tailored advice to customers that specifically address the concerns that a customer may have. They can help a customer wade through, for example, really complicated information. For example, if I were to go buy a vehicle, I don't know a whole lot about vehicles. So while I may have access to information about a vehicle's performance and other sort of technical aspects of the vehicle's make and model, I don't really know what a lot of that means. And so one of the things that salespeople can do is help us, or help me, or help customers in general, wade through complicated or sophisticated information that maybe the average customer may not fully understand. They may understand it a little bit, but maybe they need help sort of navigating that complicated or complex information. Of course, salespeople, one of their main roles is to manage that customer relationship, make sure that they're gathering information about the customer, that they're recording that information for future use, and really developing that relationship and making sure that the customer is ultimately satisfied and that their needs are being met. And a lot of sales these days is actually providing better service after the sale. So it's certainly important to provide excellent customer service all through the purchase process, but really adding value and helping to ensure long-term customer relationships. A lot of that depends on after sale service. So after the transaction is made, what are the salespeople doing to make sure that that customer is continually satisfied, and at the end of the day will come back to that business again and again and again when their needs change, or whether they want to upgrade their vehicle or whatever. So value add today is not just about providing information, although salespeople do still provide information. It's all of this other stuff that good salespeople do to help add value during the buying process. Careers in sales, there's plenty of opportunity out there, and there will continue to be plenty of opportunity out there. Sales positions represent one of the largest job posting categories in online job postings. If you look through some of the regional and national job posting banks, or in the Globe and Mail job ads section, you'll see a lot of these positions are tied to sales. That's a huge, huge category for jobs in this country and throughout the world. Careers in sales offer some pretty substantial benefits, including financial rewards, which we'll talk about a little bit more both in this lecture and in later lectures. Different kinds of recognition from internal, your peers, but also broader recognition. It offers some job security. The reality is that we're always going to need salespeople. That the role of salespeople may change over time, but I don't see anytime in the near future getting rid of salespeople. I just see their role maybe evolving and changing. And the other thing in terms of security, in terms of how sales jobs offer security, the reality is that a lot of the skills you develop in a sales position are transferable. Meaning, if your company goes out of business or you're looking for a promotion or a career opportunity, the skills that you develop through sales positions are very much transferable and very, very desired in the labor market. Approximately 10% of all the Canadian workforce are in positions where the primary function of that position is sales. But if you add in the people in the Canadian workforce that has at least part of their job, not necessarily a lot of it or even the majority, but part of their job involves sales, that 10% figure actually goes up much, much, much higher. Positions that we don't necessarily think of as being sales positions actually very often have some sales components embedded into those positions, and those would not be counted in this 10% number. There are a lot of different titles that are used to sort of encapsulate or capture sales positions. And you can see these on the list there, slight to the right of your screen, and that certainly isn't an exhaustive list by any means. There are two primary factors that contribute to the titles that sales positions often have. One is reflecting a shift from the focus on selling, the functionality of the position, to this idea of partnering, that salespeople are increasingly viewing their role as a salesperson as one of a partner, an equal, somebody who's there to help rather than to sell a product. So the focus is more sort of client oriented. And in addition, another factor that's contributing to these various titles is a reflection of the differing education or skill sets that are required to do these positions. So this is just a short list, but for example, at Starbucks, the baristas are called partners. At Walt Disney World, the people who work in the theme parks, for example, are called cast members. So lots of different companies use different titles that really are meant to encapsulate this person as being a member of the team, and part of their role is in fact selling. So just some of the potential benefits of a career in sales. There is considerable potential for above average income. If you are successful in sales, if you are working in certain types of sales, the income opportunities actually can be quite substantial and quite easily can get into the six figures in certain industry categories, for example, like pharmaceuticals, like real estate, like vehicle sales, business to business sales. All of those offer real potential for very high levels of personal income. But in addition to the actual money that you might make, careers in sales offer the benefit of above average, what we call psychic income, sort of this boost to your ego, this need that people have for recognition, for things like job security, for opportunities for advancement, those sorts of things. Careers in sales offer those opportunities if you're really good at it. So in addition to the money that you make, there's all kinds of other sort of intrinsic income or benefits that you might derive. There are considerable opportunities for advancement, often within a single organization or certainly between organizations, because again, the skills that you develop with respect to personal selling and sales are very, very transferable. Selling a vehicle is not that much different than selling an industrial product. It's a lot of the same skill sets. The specific knowledge may be different, the specific target audience may be different, but the skill set, a lot of that is very much transferable. There are actually considerable opportunities for women in sales. Historically, women have been not well represented in certain categories of sales positions, sort of things like um, a sales position in a bank, or vehicle sales, or even in to a lesser extent real estate or business to business sales. And when in actuality, as the number of women who are making uh, purchases in those areas, so doing their own banking, buying their own vehicle with or without an opposite sex partner or husband or spouse, we're seeing a demand for more women in these positions because there's more women who are making the purchase decisions. They want to have that part of their customer segment represented in the sales force as well. And the same can be said for uh, minorities. So people who come from different racial, cultural, ethnic backgrounds, different linguistic backgrounds. As the country becomes more diverse, we're seeing more opportunities for minorities who want to work in sales as a means for them to help connect to potentially new market segments, but also bring a really interesting skill set and perspective for existing customers as well. So we're seeing lots of opportunities for people who maybe have not traditionally found career opportunities in sales historically, are increasingly finding great opportunities for themselves from a professional perspective in the field of sales. You'll often find sales positions categorized as either being inside sales positions or outside sales positions. And these two categories at one time probably were quite exclusive, meaning you were either one or the other. That is changing a little bit, is in that some sales positions actually are maybe a bit more hybrid. They have some sort of inside components and some outside components, but for the sake of the next couple of slides, we'll treat them as if they're separate. An inside salesperson performs a lot of the selling activities at the employer's location. They work at a specific location, either a retail store or an office building or whatever, and they typically do a lot of their work either over the telephone or via emails. They may take orders, they may make calls to customers, and they may provide outside support for salespeople who are out in the field, or they may take care of customers who walk in the door. But they basically work inside a company office or setting, and conduct the bulk of their selling activities in that particular location. Inside, salespeople are often called customer service representatives, and they're there. If you go into Best Buy, for example, and you're looking at the laptops, and a customer service representative comes over and asks if they can help you and talk to you about the different models of laptops or the different options available to you, that would be somebody who's an inside salesperson. It also can include telemarketing, which can either be inbound or outbound marketing. And don't get that confused with the inside or outside salespeople. They're not exactly the same thing. Telemarketing is a form of outbound inside sales. That's a little bit of linguistic gymnastics there. And telemarketing can include people who simply receive phone calls from customers and help customers either make a purchase or deal with problems unsolicited. The customer calls them, or sort of the infamous idea of telemarketers, the people who call you at supper time and trying to sell you something over the phone. That would be an example of telemarketing as well. In contrast, outside salespeople travel. They go to their prospects or their potential customers, either at the customer's place of business or at their residence. So they do a lot or the bulk of their sales activities outside the office or the physical space that their company typically occupies. Again, that doesn't mean that the salesperson is never in the office. It just means that the majority of their sales-oriented work happens outside of those spaces. Both inside and outside salespeople who work for the same company, they really do rely heavily on each other. It would not be uncommon, for example, to have an outside salesperson who's meeting with the customer, maybe at their place of business, to call back to the office and talk to an inside salesperson, maybe to gather information or to send out a package or to help execute a transaction. So these two groups very much often work together collaboratively to achieve the organization's goals. Not all sales positions focus on the end consumer. There's certainly lots that do, but there are a significant portion of sales jobs that actually exist throughout the distribution channel. So you could be in a sales position where your job is to sell to other businesses, for example. So you're not selling to end consumers. Your job is to sell to another business or organization, and then their job is to sell to the end consumer. We also have what are called missionary or details sales positions, where their job isn't really to sell goods and services, it's to generate goodwill and to stimulate demand along channel members. So their job isn't necessarily to sell products. Their job is to their focus is really on those relationships and helping make those connections and get sort of a positive frame of mind around the products and services that other salespeople in the organization might actually be selling. Jobs in service sales is probably the biggest category of sales positions or of jobs period in North America. It does include business to business and business to consumer sales. So you're not selling products, you're selling services. Nearly 80% of the Canadian labor force is employed in some fashion in the service sector of the economy. That could include, restaurants, retail, education, health, etc. It's a huge part of the labor force in Canada, and a lot of those positions have sales components built into them. The growth rate for the service industry is higher than for the goods or products industry, and we're going to continue to see growth in the service sectors, more so, faster, bigger growth than we see in physical, tangible products. Opportunities for service selling include hotels, motels, convention centers, telecommunications, financial services or banking, media sales, so whether it's advertising, radio sales, newspapers, those sorts of things. Of course, real estate, insurance, and business services like legal services, accounting services, or consulting services are all would all fall under the umbrella of service sales. Another way to categorize sales positions is business to business sales positions or business to consumers. So, a lot of manufacturers, people who make products, um, don't actually sell their products to end consumers, but instead sell their products to other businesses. These could include industrial salespeople who sell sort of large scale manufacturing equipment, for example. It could be sales engineers or application engineers who help not only in terms of designing, developing custom, tailored products and services for their customers, but also then help their business clients utilize and fully leverage the inherent value embedded into those products. So making sure that you're getting the most value out of the products that you're purchasing from these businesses. It could be field salespeople who are sort of the regular face that customers would see, business customers would see. These are the ones who would do the face-to-face visits with new customers or with current customers, and then rely more on for example, the sales engineers for specific tailored custom um, products and services that need to be developed. But the field salespeople are your everyday out there in the field working with customers on a day-to-day basis. And as we mentioned a few slides ago, the missionary salespeople whose job really isn't to sell, it's really to build that goodwill, those relationships. So it could be, for example, the CEO who takes a really big new client out for a nice dinner. The purpose of that is not to sell products and services, it's to generate a goodwill between the two organizations that eventually, hopefully, will lead to um, sales opportunities and revenue for the business. So the other type of besides business to business sales is business to consumer sales. Well-trained salespeople who add value to traditional shopping experiences for people like me and you when we go out and shop for goods and services for our own consumption. It can include retail salespeople, direct salespeople, so these independent contractors who represent manufacturers that sell products and services often face to face or via the phone or via the internet. So they don't act necessarily on behalf of a single company, although they can, but they don't work for the company per se. They're independent contractors. And then, of course, you have network marketing. So these manufacturers often rely on a large independent network of consultants to help distribute and sell their products on behalf of customers. There's real high earning potential through direct sales commissions if you're successful. And again, it's one of the fastest growing areas of sales is this idea of direct sales. And the reason is if you're somebody who's interested in a direct sales position, you have to be very highly motivated. The company doesn't pay you, or you don't make any money unless you're extremely effective. And so one of the reasons why a lot of organizations want to work with direct sales people is because they typically are incredibly highly motivated, which of course leads to sales. We often don't think of knowledge workers as having a role or playing a role in selling and sales, but in fact, they do. Knowledge workers are those people whose primary responsibility is around creating, using, sharing, and applying knowledge. And often in these, if you were to look at a job ad for these kinds of positions, you you have to look deeply or sort of tease it out if you're looking for the sales component, but very often these positions do actually have an important sales component, whether it's um, people who are in management positions whose day-to-day job might not be sales, but whose responsibilities may encompass sales in some fashion. Professionals like lawyers and accountants, we don't typically think of them as being uh, jobs that have sales as a component of those jobs, but the reality is you need to bring in new clients if you're a lawyer or an accountant, especially if you're a partner and expected part of your role is to grow the business. You very much are responsible for bringing in new customers. Entrepreneurs very much need to have good high level of sales skills, whether it's to sell to your end consumers or whether it's to sell your business idea to potential investors. Selling is an important part of the job for entrepreneurs. And of course, marketing personnel, whether you're directly in a sales position or whether you're in a different type of marketing position, sales is very often a component of these knowledge-based positions. The leaders of organizations, those CEOs, those directors, those managers, even if their position doesn't say they're responsible for sales, they are in fact responsible for sales. Their job involves constantly looking for new customers, capturing, processing, communicating information to those, especially those really high-end customers, um, and ultimately growing the business. And of course, in order to grow the business, you have to sell your product. So even if their day-to-day responsibilities don't directly tie to sales, in fact, managerial positions all have an important sales component to them. We often don't think of our professionals as having a sales function, but actually sales do play an important role if you're a lawyer or a designer or an engineer or a programmer, dentists or counselors, accountants. All of these types of positions, while their primary function is to provide those professional services, for many of them, part of that involves generating, bringing in new customers, new clients. And so it's important to remember that even though sales may not be the primary function of their job, in order for their organizations to thrive, they are expected to bring in new business, and that will involve sales. So, of course, entrepreneurs need to sell. They need to sell their products to customers in order to get their business off the ground. And often they need to sell their business plan to investors or to their bankers or to venture capitalists in order to get their business off the ground as well. So, entrepreneurs, regardless of whether you're a brand new startup or whether you're much further along in your business's life cycle, very much have sales as a core function of their jobs. So customer service representatives are probably the largest category of sales positions that many of us would be familiar with on a day-to-day basis. In fact, some of you actually may have had jobs already in as customer service representatives, and these knowledge workers, they help uh, execute the purchase transaction. They might deliver products, they might take orders, they might handle complaints, they might provide assistance, but their job is to help facilitate the selling process. And they can work in organizations ranging from, a retail establishment that we're familiar with, or the people who come up to us and say, "Can I help you?" Or they could work in larger sort of corporate offices and provide assistance to full-time sales representatives. So customer service reps are probably the biggest category and the one in which many of you may already be familiar. So we're going to talk a lot more over the next several weeks about learning to sell. Of course, that's what this course is all about. We're going to talk about the principles of selling and building those customer relationships. We're going to talk about different kinds of uh, selling training or learning opportunities, including corporate sponsored training, vendor training, various certificate programs, and of course what we're doing right here, which is college and university courses that are devoted to selling and helping students to learn how to sell. We will talk about this in much more detail in future weeks, but I do want to take a moment to say this is actually a challenging thing to teach in a classroom. It's kind of like trying to teach somebody how to swim but never setting foot in the water. Um, there's only so much you can do in a classroom to help students learn how to sell. It's one of those things that practical experience and being out in the real world ultimately is one of the best ways to learn. Of course, we can't do that in a university classroom, even outside of sort of COVID-19 and all the restrictions that are in place on us now. The reality is it's very difficult to give students a real opportunity to practice and develop selling skills in a university class, but we will spend some time talking about as much of these skills as we can. You'll do some reflecting on where you've developed practice these skills in the past and some opportunities where you could practice those in the future. And we'll talk about how we can take what we learn in this class and find ways to apply it so that you can actually develop these skills, not just learn about selling. So just a few more comments on personal selling and sales as a career. Personal selling is often used as a promotional method where your employment performance is very much measured by your sales performance. As we mentioned earlier, it's over 10% of the workforce in Canada and the US work in sales. It's actually much larger than that if you consider all those positions that aren't directly at 100% sales but have sales components built into them. Over 40% of those positions have field responsibility, meaning you're out in the community or in outside of the office with sales responsibilities. Some of the major trends include the fact that products and services are increasingly complex and sophisticated, which helps the salesperson provide value by uh, by enabling them to help a customer navigate those complexities. Um, the competition between businesses has really increased, and one of the ways businesses can stand apart from their competitors is by having a really skilled and talented sales team. And so that's why a lot of companies are investing in those those assets, the salespeople. And of course, demand for quality and value and service for customers has risen sharply. We now have lots of options when we are shopping for goods and services. We now expect really high quality, we expect lots of value, and we expect excellent customer service. And so salespeople are a vehicle through which companies can provide those things to customers. And at the end of the day, sales positions are becoming increasingly professionalized, where it's not viewed as oh, anybody can do this. It's considered a very highly skilled professional career endeavor. So we're going to talk a lot over the next several weeks about consultative selling. What does that mean? It means that salespeople view customers as people to be served, not as people to be exploited. The emphasis is on working collaboratively with people, whether it's businesses or end consumers, to meet their particular needs and to provide value. Buyers' needs are identified through two-way communications. Salespeople aren't there to tell customers what they need. Good consultative selling is back and forth, two-way communication, where both parties have an important role to play in that communication. The emphasis is on identification of needs, problem solving, and negotiation instead of manipulation. The days of consumers tolerating those sort of smarmy, manipulative, sell you anything at all costs, sort of snake oil salesman type sales positions are gone. That turns people off. It's really much more of a collaboration, a working together between salesperson and customer to meet and satisfy a need. And the emphasis is on service at every single stage of the selling process. And we'll talk about the selling process in the next couple of weeks. But the emphasis is on service. How can the salesperson help the customer, whether it's a business customer or an end consumer, work their way through the selling process? Today's customers want top quality products, and they want good relationships, service oriented. The quality of the product alone will no longer be sufficient because consumers now have enormous choice, and it's really about partnering. It's about working together to solve problems. So it's really important to understand, and we will spend the next several weeks talking about consultative selling, understand what it means and what role salespeople have in developing those types of relationships. As you can see from this little chart, consultative selling is complicated. It's not just about getting somebody to buy a product. It's really about building relationships, and it employs everything from psychology to communications to sociology, and it's about helping the consumer through every single stage of the buying process. And if you actually look at this little chart on our screen, need discovery, selection of the solution, satisfaction of presentation, and servicing sales, you should see some parallels to the buying process that we discussed at length in intro marketing. The salesperson has a role to play, an important role to play at all of these various stages. And so basically that's what we're going to be talking about over the next several weeks. Just want to end this particular slideshow with this graph that will sort of encapsulate the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about over the next several weeks. We're going to talk about how to build relationships. We're going to talk about the products and how you can position your products to best appeal to target audiences. We're going to talk about customers a lot and how you build those important relationships. And we're going to talk about presentation strategy and how you communicate with your customers. Of course, within all of these, we're going to be talking about ethics. So this is just a bit of a visual depiction of the kinds of things we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. Thank you for listening to this week's discussions, and we'll chat with you soon.